there's any movie that once made Americans scared to fly for a while, it's Airplane. This is the movie that made you scared of fish inflatable pilots and waking up in the middle of the night from nightmares. And the genius idea behind Airplane sits right there. It takes an aviation disaster film, then rips it apart into one giant, insane, and timeless comedy. But after almost half a century, what happened to the faces that made that classic film? Which direction did their lives take after stepping off that plane, who stayed in Hollywood, who walked away from the spotlight, who went through illness, tragedy, heartbreak, or return nobody saw coming? Let's dive in together, and throughout this video, I'll be dropping some of the weirdest facts Airplane has hidden for years, so don't miss a single second. Now buckle up and let's get this flight started. Number 1, Robert Hays as Ted Stryker. Let's start with Robert Hays, who stepped into Airplane in 1980.
Kramer hears about this, the ship's gonna hit the...
And turned his very first movie into a role of a lifetime. Born in 1947, Hays came up from the Old Globe stage, then moved into television with Angie as a notable milestone right before Airplane came out. Back then, he wasn't a big movie star. He was just at that exact moment where one role could change the whole trajectory of a career, and Ted Stryker did exactly that. After Airplane, Robert Hays didn't go down the blockbuster superstar path. He chose a steadier route that old-school American audiences know well: films, television voice work, sitcoms, and steady appearances across decades. Audiences saw him again in Airplane, To Cat's Eye, Homeward Bound, as the voice of Tony Stark in the Iron Man cartoon, and even that 70s show. Hays' personal life wasn't full of loud scandals. He married Cherie Curry, had a son named Jake, then divorced in 1997. What stands out is that after the breakup, they stayed on good terms and remained committed to raising their child together. His biggest life turning point came from a very real accident. He once broke his neck while body surfing in Hawaii, had to wear a halo brace during recovery, and spent a period of his life almost completely away from the spotlight. Before becoming an actor, Hays served as a corpsman in Vietnam and was awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Medal for rescuing people in a helicopter crash. Robert Hays isn't just Ted Stryker from a classic comedy. His life is far deeper than that bright image on screen. This year, Robert Hays is 79 years old, still alive, and still meeting audiences on the Airplane Live tour with Julie Hagerty in 2026. Nearly half a century has passed, but Ted Stryker is still the name people instantly connect to him. And after the man who safely landed that plane, let's move on to the most memorable female face of the film, Julie Hagerty. Number 2, Julie Hagerty as Elaine Dickinson.
You'd better tell the captain we've got to land as soon as we can. This woman has to be gotten to a hospital.
Hottest woman of the 80s. She was born in 1955 in Cincinnati, and when Airplane came out in 1980, she was just 25. Before that, Julie moved from modeling into the New York stage scene. She had a small role in All That Jazz, but it got cut from the final film. So for most American audiences, Airplane was really her big screen debut. After Airplane, Julie Hagerty became a face people remembered instantly. She didn't chase loud celebrity status. She played the long game. A Midsummer Night's sex comedy, Lost in America. What About Bob Noises Off? And years later, Marriage Story all show a career that's steady, clean, and tough. What's interesting is that even though she got famous very early, it wasn't until Marriage Story in 2019 that she had another project that put her back in the awards season conversation. Julie Hagerty's personal life didn't explode in tabloid fashion, but it wasn't exactly smooth either. She openly said that fame came too fast after Airplane, and she didn't feel comfortable with it. She has dyslexia, and the first time someone asked for her autograph, she was so nervous she misspelled her own message. Before her career really took off, she was part of the scandal-filled romantic circle around Bob Fosse. Later, she went through a failed marriage, then remarried Richard Kagan. Julie's story isn't about collapsing under the spotlight. It's about a woman who stepped into fame too early, felt awkward with it, but didn't let it consume her. This year, Julie Hagerty is 71. She's still working, still being brought back by audiences because of Airplane. And in 2026, she's still touring live with Robert Hays on Airplane Live. The Los Angeles Times also reported she lives with Richard Kagan and cares for 3 rescue horses. Nearly half a century has passed, but Elaine Dickinson still holds her place in audience memory. And after Julie Hagerty, we move to the most serious man in the film who also made the whole world laugh the most, Leslie Nielsen. Number 3, Leslie Nielsen as Dr. Rumack. Some people spend half their life in the business before finding where they truly belong, on screen. And Leslie Nielsen is one of the best examples. He was born in 1926 in Canada, stepped into Airplane in 1980 at 54, meaning he was no longer a young face. Before that, Nielsen was a legit dramatic actor with live television Forbidden Planet, The Poseidon Adventure, and dozens of serious, straight-laced roles. Then with Dr. Rumack, he completely shifted that trajectory. Airplane didn't just give Leslie Nielsen an iconic line, it gave him the most glorious second half of his entire career. Leslie Nielsen grew up with an abusive father, and at 17 he joined the Royal Canadian Air Force. There's also something many audiences never knew: he had significant hearing loss and wore hearing aids for most of his life. He once said he used them to hear dialogue clearly without making his hearing worse. Nielsen's personal life wasn't peaceful either. He was married 4 times, had 2 daughters from his second marriage, and only later in life settled down with Barbary Earl. He wasn't a spotless star, but his story didn't follow the usual Hollywood self-destruction pattern either. What stands out more is that he didn't resist the turning point in his career. After Airplane, he embraced that deadpan comedy style, moved into Police Squad, and then The Naked Gun, transforming from a longtime dramatic actor into the king of spoof comedy for an entire generation. Not many people over 50 pull that off. Leslie Nielsen passed away on November 28, 2010 due to complications from pneumonia at the age of 84. But what he left behind is much bigger than a supporting role in Airplane. He left behind a whole style and changed how American audiences enjoy comedy films. Number 4, Peter Graves as Captain Clarence Over. Peter Graves was born in 1926.
Victor, we're running into some heavy weather. Can you?
Birth name Peter.
Roger, take over.
And when Airplane came out in 1980, he was already 54. Before that, Graves wasn't new. He was already a television star thanks to his role as Jim Phelps in Mission Impossible, even winning a Golden Globe for it in 1971. He was also the younger brother of James Arness, but changed his last name early to avoid living in his brother's shadow. Peter Graves' personal life wasn't full of Hollywood-style explosions. In fact, it was unusually clean. He married Joan Endress in 1950 and stayed with her until his death, nearly 60 years, and they had 3 daughters. With Graves, the heavy parts weren't scandals, but physical setbacks and aging. In 1984, he slipped on an icy runway in Lake Tahoe, broke both his upper and lower jaw, and needed about 100 stitches around his mouth. That was a severe injury for someone audiences saw as solid as steel. Because his personal life was so stable, what remains is the image of a classic man, disciplined, structured, and incredibly steady for this industry. After Airplane, Peter Graves didn't try to look younger or chase new comedy trends. He continued using what built his name: a strong, face-deep voice and commanding presence. He returned to Mission Impossible from 1988 to 1990, hosted Biography on A&E, and had a long run on Seventh Heaven. Not long before he passed, he still said he wasn't ready to retire. But on March 14, 2010, after a family brunch, Peter Graves collapsed outside his home from a heart attack and passed away at 83 just 4 days before his 84th birthday. Number 5, Lloyd Bridges as Steve McCroskey. Lloyd Bridges was born in 1913, and when Airplane came out in 1980, he was already 67. At that point, Lloyd didn't need anyone to discover him. He already had a full career behind him, from studio films to television, especially Sea Hunt, the role that made him a household name across America. So Airplane wasn't his first rise to fame. It was a late reinvention, and a beautiful one. In the early 1950s, Bridges was blacklisted due to involvement with Actors Lab and being linked to communist leanings. Back then, that was enough to end a career. He had to go through hearings, cooperate with investigations, and only then slowly rebuild his place. Many never came back from that. Lloyd Bridges did. And not only did he return, he built another major chapter in television, then years later reinvented himself again through comedy. But the heaviest part of Lloyd Bridges' life was in his family. He and Dorothy Bridges married in 1938, and stayed together nearly 60 years. Something rare in Hollywood. They had 4 children, including Beau and Jeff Bridges. But in 1948, they lost their son Garrett Miles Bridges to sudden infant death syndrome. That pain never faded. Biographical sources show it stayed with them for years, and even decades later, they were still involved in raising awareness about SIDS. Later in life, Lloyd Bridges also dealt with heart disease. Reports say he lived with the condition starting in 1992 before passing away at home in Los Angeles on March 10, 1998, at the age of 85. But even at the end, he never faded. Airplane opened a new comedy phase for him, leading to Hot Shots and other late-career spoof roles. That's rare in an actor who lived long enough to have 2, even 3 full careers in one lifetime. Number 6. Robert Stack as Rex Kramer. Robert Stack was the kind of man who just had to hold a radio and squint once and the whole screen tightened up. He was born in 1919 in Los Angeles, and when Airplane came out in 1980, he was already 61. At that point, Stack needed no introduction. He was already a steel-faced figure of old Hollywood, debuting in 1939, earning an Oscar nomination for Written on the Wind, winning an Emmy for The Untouchables, and later building a second life on television with Unsolved Mysteries. On the surface, Robert Stack looked like the perfect product of old California wealthy, sharp, strong voice playing polo shooting skeet, driving speedboats, and moving in Hollywood circles early. But his life wasn't as smooth as it looked. His parents divorced when he was just 1. He moved to Paris with his mother as a child, then returned to Los Angeles around age 6 and had to relearn English even though he spoke fluent French. His father died when he was 10. His wife later said his mother pushed him into sports to fill that gap, and from there, Stack grew into a very classic American man, reserved, tough, self-contained. He later served in the Navy during World War II as a gunnery officer. Stack married Rosemary Beau in 1956, the first marriage for both, and they stayed together until his death. They had a son and a daughter. There were no major romantic scandals around Robert Stack. The heavier part came later in life, and it's a familiar story for older men health. In 2002, he underwent radiation therapy for prostate cancer. Doctors later found 2 blocked arteries, but he didn't go through open heart surgery because his body had already endured too much radiation. What's bittersweet is that according to his wife, right before he passed, Robert Stack still felt pretty good and was even thinking about a new golf swing. Then on May 14, 2003, he passed away from heart failure at home in Bel Air at the age of 84. Number 7. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as Roger Murdoch. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar didn't need Hollywood to become a legend. When Airplane came out in 1980, he was 33 already, an NBA superstar standing 7'2", and a name big enough that just stepping into the cockpit as Roger Murdoch made audiences laugh instantly. The brilliance of the role is that Kareem poked fun at his own serious image. With Airplane, he wasn't trying to build an acting career, he was showing that even a sports icon could flip his own image in the best way. Kareem married Janice Brown in 1971, converted to Islam, and took the name Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, then divorced in 1978, right before Airplane came out. His personal life wasn't exactly calm. In 1983, his house burned down, destroying about 3,000 of his favorite jazz records. In 1998, he ran into trouble at Toronto Airport for carrying marijuana, paid a civil fine of $500, and told customs he used it for migraines. That incident came right after an assault accusation from a traffic dispute was dropped. The later years were even heavier. In 2008, Kareem was diagnosed with chronic myelogenous leukemia. In 2020, he revealed he had also dealt with prostate cancer. Then, at the end of 2023 at age 76, he fell at a concert in Los Angeles, broke his hip, and needed surgery. This year, Kareem is 79. He's still alive, still writing regularly on Substack, still a strong public voice. Roger Murdoch was just a fun supporting role in Airplane, but Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's real life has never been light. Those first
One
7
thing,
names
do you know
already
what
tell
he had for
something
dinner?
crystal clear.
Yes, of course, we
Airplane
both had
was not the
fish.
kind of
Why?
comedy built
Oh,
on a
it's
few
nothing to be
lucky
alarmed about.
jokes.
We'll be
No.
back to you very
This
quickly.
movie was put together with faces so serious that just looking at them makes you think an evacuation order is about to be announced, And that's exactly where everything starts drifting off course in the best possible way. The first story is the one that really matters. Paramount originally wanted the safer route, the one Hollywood loves: grab a few of the hottest comedians at the time, like Bill Murray or Chevy Chase, throw them in and call it done. But Zaz did not play it that way. They picked people who looked like they could sign emergency paperwork, read a crisis announcement, or order an entire airport to stand still. Then there was Julie Hagerty. The crew realized very quickly that they had something extremely rare in their hands. Julie's innocence would fall apart if anybody touched it the wrong way. So they did not want her watching dailies too early. They were afraid Julie would start overthinking, and you know how that goes. The second natural charm starts becoming aware of itself, the magic is basically gone. And here's my favorite detail. The role of Roger Murdoch was originally written for Pete Rose. In the end, it went to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar after he bargained his pay from $30,000 up to $35,000 just because Kareem wanted to buy a rug that cost exactly that much. That's right. One turn in American film history got blocked in the middle of the road by a rug. Sounds ridiculous, but with Airplane, ridiculous is exactly when everything works best. Now let's step away from the main core cast. I want to take you toward the faces that stood a little off-center and then see where life took them afterward. Number 8, Lorna Patterson as Randy. Do you remember Randy? Randy was not the biggest role in the movie.
Can I get you something?
She was one of the most memorable supporting characters and one that stuck hard in people's minds. Patterson was born in 1956 in Whittier, California. When Airplane came out in 1980, she was 24. Before that, she had already been working since high school, doing melodrama at Knott's Berry Farm, then moving into television with Working Stiffs and Good Time Girls. Airplane was the role that really made audiences remember her name. After this movie, Lorna Patterson did not disappear right away. She had another very clear jump forward with the lead role in the series Private Benjamin from 1981 to 1983, then kept doing television stage work and voice acting in the years after that. But what stands out is that her career came to a stop pretty early. Based on the professional records still available, Patterson left the screen in 1993 while she was still at an age when a lot of actresses were still fighting to hold their place in Hollywood. Lorna Patterson's personal life did not have a lot of scandal, but it took a turn strong enough to matter more than scandal. She married Michael Lembeck, had 2 children, then a few years later decided to convert to Judaism. From there, her life went in a direction very few Airplane fans could have guessed: religious study, a path of service, and by 2009 she was ordained as a cantor at the Academy for Jewish Religion in California. This year, Lorna Patterson is 70. She is no longer an active actress, but her story is one of the strangest in the Airplane cast. Not a downfall, not a scandal, but a full walk away from the spotlight into a completely different life. Number 9, Stephen Stucker as Johnny Henshaw Jacobs. Stephen Stucker did not have much screen time in Airplane, but a few minutes were enough for him to steal the whole frame. He was born in 1947 in Iowa, and when the movie came out in 1980, he was 33. Before that, Stucker did not come up through the traditional Hollywood route. He came out of Kentucky Fried Theater, which was exactly the place that gave birth to that weird, crooked, unpredictable kind of comedy audiences later saw in Johnny Henshaw Jacobs. After Airplane, he also had Airplane 2, Trading Places, Bad Manners, and Hot Resort, but to be fair, Johnny was still the role people remembered him for the longest. On July 12, 1984, he was diagnosed with AIDS. The following year, he went public with his illness, becoming one of the first familiar faces in entertainment to speak openly about a disease that America at the time still looked at with fear and prejudice. In an interview with the Los Angeles Times in 1985, Stucker said he believed he had been showing symptoms as far back as 1979, before the public even understood what AIDS was. He also spoke very bluntly about living too fast in New York, about needles, about drugs, and about how he had been an idiot for throwing himself into that stretch of life. The most painful part is that Stucker was not only talking about himself. He said he had lost around 40 friends to AIDS. Even so, he kept an almost defiant tone, still refused to surrender, still said life was for living, not for lying around, waiting to die. Stephen Stucker passed away on April 13, 1986 in Los Angeles from AIDS-related complications at just 38 years old. His life was short and tense and ended way too soon. Number 10. Lee Bryant as Mrs. Hammond. Lee Bryant is the kind of face you may not remember by name right away while watching, but once you've seen her, she's hard to forget. She was born in 1945 in New York, and when Airplane came out in 1980, she was 35. In the film, Mrs. Hammond was not a major role, but she was tied to one of the most famous bits in the whole movie, that panic scene where she gets calmed down by a whole line of people in a way only Airplane would dare come up with. Before and after this movie, Lee Bryant was a very steady television actress with credits stretching from Three's Company, St. Elsewhere, and Hill Street Blues all the way to Friends. Lee Bryant was once married to Miles Harmon, then later married Norman Stanley Schwartz in 1982 and had 2 children. No major romantic scandal, no public collapse for the press to tear apart. With Lee Bryant, the most notable thing was not a broken private life, but the fact that she moved through decades of American television while keeping a life that stayed fairly private and steady. What's interesting is that Lee Bryant herself helped make Mrs. Hammond even more unforgettable on screen. In the Airplane oral history, she remembered very clearly how the crew wanted to keep Julie Hagerty as natural as possible, and Bryant herself was part of that very instinctive atmosphere on set. This year she is 80, and audiences still remember her every time that classic scene comes up. Number 11. Ross Harris as Joey Hammond. Ross Harris was born in 1969 in Ventura, California, and when the movie came out in 1980, Ross was only 11. Before that, he was already a seasoned child actor, starting in commercials at age 6 and appearing in more than 100 commercials during the 1970s. Airplane placed Ross into one unforgettable moment. The scene where Joey walks into the cockpit and becomes part of one of the strangest bits of dialogue in the whole movie with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Peter Graves. After that, he also appeared in Testament, The Love Boat Little House on the Prairie, and later did sitcom work with Under One Roof. What matters is that Ross Harris's life did not follow the usual path of a former child star trying to hang on to the screen. He turned completely toward music art and images. In the 1990s, Ross co-founded the electronic band Sukiya Toured with Beck and Stereolab, then later formed DJ Me, DJ You. He made music, produced, photographed, created visuals, and gradually turned himself into a real, behind-the-scenes artist, no longer living off the memory of that Joey kid. Ross Harris left acting behind and built a whole new creative life. He photographed, Beck worked on Odelay, directed videos for Elliott Smith, including Miss Misery, the song nominated for an Oscar from Good Will Hunting. In recent years, he has kept making films, taking photographs, developing artists, and staying involved in preserving the memory of Elliott Smith. Ross Harris has 2 children, and his life shows something pretty great. The little boy in Airplane did not grow up to become a television star. He grew up to become an artist with his own path, strange lasting and very Los Angeles. This year he is 57, and after Ross Harris we come to the final woman on this list, Joyce Bulifant. Number 12. Joyce Bulifant as Mrs. Davis. Joyce Bulifant has the kind of face that instantly brings back American television from the days when it still felt decent, bright, and full of women who looked gentle but were not weak at all. She was born in 1937 in Newport News, Virginia. When Airplane came out in 1980, she was 43. By then, Joyce was already far too familiar a face for American audiences thanks to the Mary Tyler Moore show game shows, Broadway, and hundreds of television appearances. Joyce Bulifant's personal life is the heaviest part, and also the part that makes her completely different from that bright image on screen. She went through 5 marriages with James MacArthur, Edward Mallory, William Asher Glade, Bruce Hanson, and finally Roger Perry. In her own memoir, My 4 Hollywood Husbands, Joyce spoke openly about dealing with the alcoholism of several husbands' emotionally dependent relationships and the mental cost of always trying to save somebody else while forgetting herself. Joyce did not discover she had dyslexia until she was over 40. After that, she did not hide it, she turned it into an important part of the second half of her life. She advocated for dyslexia research, wrote a musical on the subject, founded the Hans Christian Andersen Award to honor dyslexic people making positive contributions, and stayed involved for years with child help. In other words, Joyce Bulifant did not just go through difficulty. She turned that difficult part into work that helped other people. This year, Joyce Bulifant is 89. She is still present in the world of stage work and television nostalgia, even though her final husband, Roger Perry, passed away in 2018 after a battle with prostate cancer. To me, Joyce Bulifant is exactly the right ending for this list. Not the loudest, not the most tragic, but a woman who went through enough marriages, enough disappointment, enough struggle with herself, and still held on to that brightness America once loved so much. If you made it all the way here with me, here's your final reward. Not one huge shock, but 3 little behind-the-scenes pieces that make Airplane even stranger than what you saw on screen. First, Lee Bryant. When she first held the script, she almost could not understand what was supposed to be funny about it. And honestly, I don't blame her. On paper, Airplane must have looked like an aviation disaster written by somebody who had not slept for 3 nights straight. It was only when everything got staged that the movie's very calm kind of insanity finally took shape. Then, there's the money side. Airplane was cheaper than a lot of people think. Lee Bryant remembered that almost everybody was paid at scale, which means nobody walked into this for some giant check. That makes me like this movie even more. A bunch of very familiar faces, a script that took crazy chances, a budget that was not all that impressive, and then they made a comedy that outlived a whole lot of expensive blockbusters. And the last detail is the one that's really sweet, because there were a lot of slightly grown-up jokes on set. Lee Bryant and Nicholas Pryor almost became temporary parents to Ross Harris, constantly reaching over to cover the little boy's ears whenever the adults started saying dirty stuff. And that's where I want to end this ride. Airplane may be silly, but the people who made it were not soulless. If somebody made a video called The Funniest Moments in Airplane, I honestly believe it would end up almost as long as the movie itself. That's the kind of film where every few minutes there's another line, another expression, another cut, or another ridiculous detail that makes you laugh all over again, even after decades. The more you go back to it, the more you realize there's still way too much left to dig up. Today we really only did one thing. We looked back at those old faces, saw how time moved through them and where life off-screen ended up taking them. But Airplane is clearly a whole lot more than that. So now it's your turn. Share in the comments who you remember most, what moment you love most, and when the first time you saw Airplane was. If you want, I'll make a separate video on 20 insane facts surrounding this movie, from behind the scenes and casting to the weird little stories only Airplane could have. Drop your comments hard, and don't forget to subscribe to Weird Movie Secrets.